Vertebrate taxa, the number of species that are found in the So you have four taxa up here, and I asked you to rank them in the order from the most diverse, the most number of species, to the least diverse, the fewest number of species. So which of these is the most diverse?
Fish.
The fish. They were the first. What is the second most?
Reptiles.
Birds. There are more birds than there are of the other three that were listed here. What is the third most?
Reptiles.
Reptiles. And then what is the least diverse of the ones listed here?
Mammals.
The mammals. Okay, so make sure you have an idea. I'm not going to really ask about the specific numbers, but you need to know which ones are the most diverse, which ones are the least diverse. Where would amphibians fall in here? Nobody knows. Where do you think?
Between birds and reptiles?
Between birds and reptiles? There are actually very few amphibians out there. They would fall between the reptiles and the mammals. Okay. Question? Okay, we'll see me after class then. What is the correct order of organization when we're talking about the vertebrate body, the animal bodies?
D.
D. You look at it, that's the only one that goes from the simplest, the cell layer, up to the most complex, the system layer. Yes? Bring it up here. Behaviorally, crocodiles are most similar to what organisms listed there? Mammals, birds, fish, or they're not really like any of them?
Birds.
They're most similar to the birds. If you look at behavioral characteristics, not biological, but in biology they're also, so keep it down, everyone, come on. Don't make me ask again. Not biologically, they're also similar to birds, but in terms of behavior, they share many of the same traits. One of the most common of these is parental care. Crocodiles build nests just like the birds do. Crocodiles care for their young after the egg patch, just like birds do. In fish, what does the lateral line detect? Pressure changes, temperature changes, light changes, or salinity changes?
Pressure.
Pressure changes. We talked about that being a unique characteristic that is important for the organism to detect in an aquatic environment. True or false? In hominids, bipedalism evolved after an increase in brain size.
False.
False. If you look at the hominids, the first thing that happened is they developed the ability to walk upright, bipedalism. After that, we start to see an increase in the brain size when we look at the fossil record. Number 9, which of the following is not a hominoid? Gorilla, lemur, human, or gibbon? Lemur. So what are the characteristics of the hominoids? Anyone remember? They don't have a tail, but there are monkeys that don't have tails as well.
Hair?
All mammals have hair.
Bones.
I think I might have a good question for the exam.
Oh.
What stage of echinoderms are bilaterally symmetric? Is it their adult stage, their juvenile stage, or not bilaterally symmetric at any stage, or they're bilaterally symmetric at all stages?
Juvenile.
They're bilaterally symmetric at the juvenile stage. What are the echinoderms? Starfish, sea stars, sea urchins, sand dollars, that sort of thing. If you look at the adult stage, they're not bilaterally symmetric. What kind of symmetry do they exhibit? Pentaradial symmetry, 5 lines of symmetry. But they're classified in the bilaterious, organisms that are bilaterally symmetric, because in the juvenile stage, they are bilaterally symmetric. And the bonus question, which of the following vertebrates is most ancestral? The lemur, the hagfish, the frog, or the crocodile?
Hagfish.
Hagfish. We didn't talk about them too much. I mentioned them very briefly, but they're an ancestral fish. One of the things that we use to know that they're an ancestral fish is the fact they don't have jaws. All right, so that was quiz number 5. Remember, we're going to have 2 more quizzes throughout the course of the semester. The 2 lowest quizzes get dropped. The grade for this quiz will be posted online today. As always, make sure you check the Blackboard system today to make sure your quiz is available. If not, you need to come see me either today or tomorrow. The grades are there. It's your responsibility to check, your responsibility to contact me if there's a problem. Yes?
Sometimes when I'm doing the homework, like sometimes it asks me a question, right? And like it doesn't even give me any options. Like it'll ask, like one time I was doing the homework and it said organize these levels, whatever, but it didn't say anything. It was just blank, like all 4 little
Because
squares.
you have to drop and drag stuff.
Yeah, but they were all blank. So I just pushed submit, and I still got it right, and there was like 3 other answers that I was wrong. And then it would ask me for some other name, and I would put the exact name, and it would just like change it, like, oh, it's supposed to be singular, or you put it in the plural form, like.
I'm not the programmer for this. I don't know why that might happen. If it's one question here or there, that's not going to be a big issue. If it's happening a lot, I would contact the McGraw-Hill website, because they're the ones that can actually tell you what's going on. It might be as simple as updating your Adobe Flash player or something like that, but I'm not sure what it might be. All right, so quick update about the test. Someone asked me about this morning. The test is, that's supposed to be out. I thought I had changed it, but the test is supposed to be starting Wednesday. So that's next Wednesday, April 11th, through Friday, April 12th. April 10th through the 12th. What day is it today? Yes, okay. Wednesday, April 10th through Friday, April 12th, okay? It's going to cover the 4 chapters. We're on chapter 43 right now. The next chapter, dealing with the nervous system, will also be included on the exam. I am going to change the dates for the LearnSmart system. They are currently listed as due on Friday the 5th, because that's where we initially talked about having the exam. I will change the dates for those 4 chapters so that it's next Wednesday. In addition, I will change the dates for the other LearnSmart chapters and also put up the new ones, so they're going to be due at the end of the semester. The 4th exam, the last exam during the class that is mandatory, will be on Wednesday, May 1st. That is the last day of lecture that we have here. So Wednesday we're going to have a lecture, which is followed by 2 study days, Thursday and Friday. The exam will be open during the study days. So you do need to do that exam at some point during that time period. The number of chapters are going to depend on how far we get. You still are going to have to do the LearnSmarts, even if we don't cover the chapters in class. But the chapters that we cover in class are going to be the ones that will be on the exam. If you want to take the final, remember, it is an optional final. The final, if you choose to take it, is going to be on Wednesday, May 8th, in this room at 8 o'clock in the morning. I believe we have an hour and 45 minutes, so it will be until 9:45. It is a cumulative final. We'll cover everything we've talked about during the course of the semester. And as I said, it is optional. If you choose to take the final and you want it to count for a grade, it will replace your lowest test grade. It won't replace your quiz grades, participation, homework, things like that. It will only replace your lowest test grade. So if you didn't do well on one exam, and that's pulling you down, you can have this final replace it. As I said, if it's graded, it will count. But you have the option of coming in here, looking at the final exam, seeing what questions are on it, starting to take it, and you can sort of realize or try and figure out how well you're going to do it. If you don't think you're going to do that well, you can bring it up to me and say, please don't grade this. Thank you, I've had a lovely semester. Okay, you don't have to say that, but you can say, please don't grade this. I won't grade it, I won't look at it again, it won't replace the lowest test grade. If you turn it in to me and have it graded, that's when it will replace the lowest test grade. As I said, it is not an online exam, it will be in here, you do need to bring a Scantron, it will be 100 questions. Yes?
The other homeworks, they're like 48 and 49, so we're going to do those still, and are they going to be due tomorrow?
No, I just said the homework that aren't on the exam are going to be changed to the end of the semester.
So it's going to be 34, 35.
The homeworks that are going to be due next Wednesday are 34, 35, 30, 43, and 44. Any questions? All right, so let's go continue on talking about animal body and regulation. We're talking about different tissue types. We're talking about epithelial tissue. When we look at the epithelial tissue, they're broken down into one of 2 categories, one of 2 classes of tissue. One of these is called simple epithelial tissue. Simple epithelial tissue is recognized because it is only 1 layer thick. Regardless of where it is on the body, because remember, epithelial tissue surrounds everything, not just the outside of the organism. If you have a cell layer that's 1 epithelial layer that's 1 layer thick, that is going to be the simple epithelial tissue. The second type is stratified epithelial tissue. Simple is 1 layer thick, stratified is more than 1 layer thick. Easy way to recognize the 2. Just look at how many cells make up that layer of epithelium. Now within those, the simple and the stratified, they're also broken down as well. Lucky for you, They're broken down the same way, whether it's simple or stratified. Some of these are called squamous cells, and it's basically just the shape of the cell. If you have a flat epithelial cell line and flat epithelial tissue, it's called a simple squamous cell. If it's 1 layer thick, it's called stratified squamous cells if it's 2 layers thick. Okay? So within each of these classes, simple or stratified, we have these different kinds of cells based on their shape. You have some that are referred to as cuboidal cells. You can sort of guess what the shape is going to be. Sort of cube shaped. They're approximately as wide as they are tall. So the squamous are flat, the cuboidal are going to be sort of cube shaped. And then lastly, you have columnar cells. And again, you can sort of guess what those are going to look like. They're going to be taller than they are wide. They look like a column. So based on the shape and the size of these epithelial tissues, you would classify them as either squamous, cuboidal, or columnar. Based on how thick the epithelial layer is, you would classify it as either simple or stratified. So as an example, here's simple versus stratified epithelium. Simple epithelium is just going to be this 1 layer thick. The cells may have extensions, they may have external parts. But the stratified is going to be very different. The stratified is going to be multiple layers thick. Now with this one, these would be columnar cells. They're taller than they are wide. With these would be squamous. They're sort of flattened, squashed shaped. So again, you're going to see different kinds of epithelial tissues, both whether it's the thickness of the epithelial layer or the shapes of the cells. So let's go through talking about some examples where we see some of these things. Simple epithelium. So the simple epithelium, 1 layer thick, we would find simple squamous epithelium in things like the lungs and the blood capillaries. Why do you think we would see this in these areas? What needs to occur in the lungs? What needs to occur in the blood capillaries? Diffusion, exactly. If you have cells, a thick layer of cells, what is that going to do to diffusion? It's going to slow it down. So in areas where you're going to want diffusion to occur across membranes, across different organ structures, different organs, you're going to want to have this very thin, very flat layer of epithelium. It's going to be 1 cell thick, and the cells are going to be flat. The delicate nature, the thin nature, the small size enables the process of diffusion. Now, what about simple cuboidal epithelium? These are going to be found in areas that line kidneys, different kinds of glands that are found in the body. It's sort of easy to understand why we see the simple squamous cells in certain areas. Once we get to cuboidal versus columnar, it's not as easy to anticipate what we're going to find. Because ultimately, they're sort of similar to each other. Usually, whether we have cuboidal or columnar has to do with what the cells are actually doing. If you have a cuboidal cell, it has a maximum volume for its size. If you have a columnar cell, it has a little bit longer reach. So you have the cuboidal simple cells in the kidney cells, lining the kidneys, several glands. You have the columnar epithelium, simple columnar epithelium. These are going to line the airways of the respiratory tract and the gastrointestinal tract. In the gastrointestinal tract, the epithelium is involved in helping to absorb nutrients and continue to process nutrients. So you have a long cell, so as the nutrients move through the cell, they can be processed, they can be metabolized, and so forth. So here's examples of the simple epithelium. We have the simple squamous, the 1 cell layer of flattened cells, simple cuboidal, and then the simple columnar. Over here it gives you examples of where we would find those. This is directly from your book. Now this other kind of epithelial layer is the stratified epithelium, multiple cell layers thick. When you have multiple cell layers, you need to differentiate between what size of the epithelial tissue you're talking about. With the simple, we talk about how you have one side that's connected, one side that's open, apical versus basal, and provide this sort of directional flow, inside versus outside. But when you have multiple cell layers thick, there are going to be some epithelial cells that are connected on both sides. They're touching other cells on both sides. So you can't have a cell itself as a group that is listed as apical or basal, but instead you classify the tissue as having sort of this directional flow. So they're named based on the apical cell layers, where they're found in this multi-cell layer region. As I said, they have the same cell types, squamous, cuboidal, or columnar. So if we talk about this stratified epithelium, the first layer of cells is going to be called the epidermis. This is the simple stratified squamous epithelium. So the epidermis is the first layer within the stratified epithelium. When you look at the epidermis, terrestrial vertebrates have a specific kind of epidermis. They have keratinized epithelium that helps provide water resistance. Keratin is a waxy substance that helps repel water. Why would you want to have this in the epithelium, in the epidermis?
So your skin won't dry out?
Not so your skin won't dry out.
Well, I mean, so the water won't diffuse out of you.
Exactly. So you're not losing water. Water is staying inside of you. It acts to repel water. It keeps water out. If you put a little drop of water on your skin, it beads up. It doesn't just get absorbed into the skin. This is because of the keratin. Lips, on the other hand, are a little bit different. Lips do not have keratin inside their epithelium. They have stratified squamous cells. This is a common thing that we see in all entire epidermis. But in the lips, it's a little bit different. They don't have the keratin. This is why your lips can get dried out. How many people get chapped lips down here? What's happening is you're losing moisture in the lips. The keratin is not keeping the moisture in. What do you do when you get chapped lips? Chapstick. What is chapstick? Not moisturizing. What it doesn't have keratin, but it has a similar substance. It has a waxy lipid substance. And this is going to help protect the lips, keep the moisture in. So that was the epithelial tissue. The next kind of tissue we have is called connective tissue. Whereas epithelial tissue can be derived from any of the embryonic dermal layers, endoderm, mesoderm, or ectoderm, the connective tissue is always going to come from mesoderm cells. So if you think to those three cell layers in the organism, you have the mesoderm. That is always where you're going to find the origin of this connective tissue. Just like epithelial cells, it's broken down into two major classes. You have one that's just called connective tissue. Sometimes it's referred to as proper connective tissue. This is sort of the generic one. There are specific characteristics that are associated with it. But if you have one that's a generic connective tissue, the other one, connective tissue is classified then as either loose or dense, and we'll go into what that means. But the other one is classified as special connective tissue. So we have just general connective tissue, proper connective tissue, and then we have special connective tissue. See, occasionally we don't like to come up with hard names with stuff. Special connective tissue is going to be one of three types. It's going to either be cartilage, bone, or blood. So when you think about a vertebrate animal, when you think about any animal, the cartilage that creates the endoskeleton is a connective tissue, it's a special connective tissue. The bone that may create the endoskeleton, please put the bone down. The bone that creates the endoskeleton is a special connective tissue. And then the blood itself is also a special connective tissue. Now, one thing that we see that we recognize in connective tissue is that they have what's called an extracellular matrix. All cells in animals, all living cells, excrete material to produce an extracellular matrix. Connective tissues do it to the extreme. They secrete huge amounts of extracellular matrix, or extracellular material, that produces what we call the matrix. And this is the characteristics that we use to identify if a tissue type can be classified as connective tissue. We look at the matrix. We look at this extracellular material. The extracellular material is usually made up of what protein fibers that are produced by the cell, but then there's also some sort of ground substance, generally some sort of semi-fluid substance that's being produced as well. So let's go into these connective tissue types. We talked about loose versus dense connective tissue in regular, proper connective tissue. So what is loose connective tissue? As you might guess from the name, this is where you have the cells that are sort of loosely scattered around. They're not packed in tightly. They're in the matrix. There's a lot of ground substance, a lot of this sort of semi-fluid material, and the cells are just sort of scattered within that extracellular material. The protein fibers help to strengthen this connective tissue. And that's going to be a key characteristic that we think of, that we see in a lot of this connective tissue. It's there for support, structural support. It may serve other purposes, but it's there. One of the benefits is that it has these protein fibers. The other kind of connective tissue, proper connective tissue, is called dense connective tissue. As you can guess, the cells are going to be packed more closely together. It's denser. What this means is there's going to be less of the ground substance, less of this semi-fluid extracellular material, because there are more cells packed in closely. In the loose, it's much more loose, they're more free-flowing, there's more extracellular material, the ground substance. In the dense, they're packed quite tightly together. You have one that's referred to as dense regular connective tissue. Here, when you have this kind of connective tissue, if you look at the protein fibers, the collagen fibers, they line up in parallel. These are the kinds of connective tissue that we see in things like tendons and ligaments. So if you actually look at one of those under the microscope, you'll see the protein fibers all lined up. You also have dense irregular connective tissue. Here the collagen fibers have different orientations. They're not all lined up in parallel with each other. There still is a very strong protective nature because of these protein fibers, because they're packed in so densely. They cover other organisms, not the outer layer, because that's the epithelium, but they help cover some different organs to provide protective structure. So they'll cover things like the kidneys, muscles, nerves, and bones. Anyone here ever get some fresh meat from the butcher or something? And you sort of have this layer of stuff that you need to cut off on the outside? That's connective tissue. That's these collagen fibers helping to cover this meat, cover the muscle, and serve to protect it. So here we see sort of these connective tissues. We have the loose connective tissues that are not tightly packed together, lots of ground substance, the dense connective tissues, where you have the cells all packed tightly together. But then, as I said, we all have this second class, the special connective tissues. These are either going to be cartilage, bone, or blood. So let's go through and talk about each of those. The cartilage is going to be recognized by what the ground substance is made of. It contains a glycoprotein called chondroitin and the collagen fibers. Now, what does that chondroitin sort of sound like? Not cartilage. Think about a group of animals we talked about. Sharks called chondrichthyes. So now you sort of see where that name comes from. What do sharks have as an endoskeleton? Cartilage. So that's where the name chondrichthyes comes from. So with the cartilage, the ground substance, these protein fibers, just like we saw with the regular dense connective tissue, the fibers are long parallel strands. They're very firm, they're very flexible. Cartilage is a very good protective substance. It doesn't stretch at all, but it can bend a little bit. Where do we have cartilage? Ears. Nose. So we have some cartilage. Most of our endoskeleton is bone, but we do have some cartilage as well. Cartilage provides great tensile strength. What is tensile strength? It means that you can stretch it and pull it. It doesn't stretch out, but it enables you to provide a lot of pressure and pulling pressure without breaking. So we see a lot of cartilage in connecting our bones together, holding bones together. Joint surfaces and so forth are going to be protected with cartilage. The second special connective tissue is bone. Bone is created from bone cells called osteocytes. These osteocytes are alive. People think that bone is dead, but it is not. It is a living organ in the body. And they produce a hardened extracellular matrix. A hardened extracellular matrix that's made of calcium phosphate. This is the bone structure itself. Okay? So again, the idea is that you have this protective structure that's being produced by these connective tissue cells. The third special connective tissue is blood. Blood, the extracellular matrix, is the fluid plasma. Anyone here ever given blood before or donated plasma before? When you donate plasma, what do they do with the blood cells? They spin it out. They don't want the red blood cells. What they're actually looking for is this extracellular matrix material. This is what the cells produce as their extracellular matrix. The plasma is this extracellular matrix. Blood cells are broken down into multiple types. The erythrocytes are red blood cells. They're involved in circulating oxygen through the body, so providing oxygen to different cells. The leukocytes are the white blood cells. They're involved in immune system response, defense of the body against invading pathogens. When you get a cut and it's sort of white and pussy, that's what those white blood cells are there. Why do they congregate around when you have some sort of wound?
So no pathogens can get in?
No pathogens can get in. If you have an opening in your skin, that's basically an open door for pathogens. Your skin is a layer of protection. If you have an opening in it, it's an open door for pathogens, the way that you can get infected. And so you have a congregation of white blood cells, these leukocytes, in that area to try and protect the body from invading pathogens. You also have a third kind of blood cell that people don't usually think about. These are called the thrombocytes. These are platelets. They're involved in a variety of processes that we'll talk about when we get to the circular blood. So if you look at these connective tissues, these are the special connective tissues. You have the cartilage, bone, and blood. You have the living cells producing this extracellular matrix. And what the extracellular matrix is defines what this connective tissue is. A third type of tissue that we have in animal bodies is the muscle cell. Muscle cells are responsible for motion. They're responsible for activity. They allow the vertebrates, they allow invertebrates to move around. So they act as the motors. Muscle cells are broken down into three types. You have smooth muscle cells, skeletal muscle cells, and cardiac muscle cells. And right there, you should be able to look at least a couple of these and sort of predict where you might find them. Skeletal muscle cells, where are they going to be found, do you think?
Skeleton.
Next to the skeleton. Cardiac muscle cells, where do you think they're going to be found? The heart. So smooth muscle cells is sort of the only one that you can look at and maybe not have a guess. Anyone have a guess where you might find smooth muscle cells?
Around the
Digestive
system.
Around the digestive system. So skeletal and cardiac muscles are also sometimes called striated muscle cells. This is based on what they look like under microscopic examination. You actually see lines, stripes, striations in the muscle cells themselves. Skeletal muscle cells differ from cardiac muscle cells in that they're under voluntary control. You can decide if you want to move a skeletal muscle. Pretty easy. There you go. But it's voluntary control. The other two muscle types, cardiac muscle and smooth muscle, are not under voluntary control, which is really a very good thing. You don't want to have to be sitting here thinking, beat my heart, beat my heart, beat my heart, beat my heart, beat my heart. Shoot, I forgot. What would happen when you're asleep? Not very good. So cardiac muscle is not under voluntary control. Smooth muscle is not under voluntary control. When you swallow a piece of food, you don't have to sit here and say, okay, contract the esophagus, move down, push the food down, push it down, or anything like that. It does it automatically. It's not voluntary control. So smooth muscles, in addition to being found on the digestive tract, they're also found on the walls of blood vessels. Blood vessels need to have muscles in order to try and aid the process of circulation. Skeletal muscle cells, as we mentioned, are usually attached to bones. They can also be attached to tendons, or rather, they're attached to bones by tendons. And so when you voluntarily decide to contract one of these, this moves your exoskeleton, or endoskeleton. Smooth muscle cells are recognized by having a single nucleus. Skeletal muscle cells, the fibers that are found in these muscle cells actually do not, or have multiple nuclei. They're not a single nucleus inside the cell. When you have a muscle cell that contracts, a skeletal muscle cell, when you actually are creating movement like this, what happens is you have myofibrils that contain different kinds of proteins, actin and myosin. And actin and myosin are linked together and they can slide back and forth. They actually have small little molecular grasping mechanisms that can sort of ratchet back and forth. And so it's this movement between the actin and the myosin that enables the muscle to contract or expand. So when you have a muscle going like this, what you're really doing is just moving these proteins back and forth within the muscle cells. Cardiac muscles are much smaller cells than either the smooth or the skeletal muscles. They're very tightly connected with each other. They each contain a single nucleus, the same thing that we saw with the smooth muscle cells. if you look at the cell under or a group of cells under the microscope, when you have these connections between the cells, they appear as dark lines. These are, under the microscope, these are called intercalated discs, and it's a way that you can sort of recognize what kind of muscle cell you're looking at. You do have gap junctions that link adjacent cells. This is important for cardiac muscle, because one thing that cardiac muscle does is it causes the heart to beat, and you want the heart to beat every single muscle cell in the heart at the same time. You don't want part of your heart to contract, but the other part not to contract. So you need to have effective communication between all the cells in the heart, all of these cardiac muscle cells. The gap junctions help communication between the cells. So they enable the cardiac muscle to ultimately function as a single unit, as one solid muscle contraction instead of different parts of the heart contracting individually. So here we have the muscle tissue types. We have the smooth muscle where it's found, skeletal muscle, and cardiac muscle. The fourth tissue type, the last tissue type in animals, is nerve tissue. Nerve tissues are cells that include things like the neurons, as well as cells that support neural activity, called the neuroglia. So neural activity is done through these neurons. Anything that has to do with motor control, processing of information is going to be controlled by these nerve cells. And we'll continue to talk about those on Friday. If you had any questions about the exam or the quiz, please come up.